Well, he looks at me, and I look at him, and he looks at me, and I look at him. And I look at him.
What you're seeing behind me here is where I last left off with the captain's quarters. I'm at a point in this project where there's so much to do that I don't know what to do next. And I kind of put myself in that position because I did such a huge step last time where I built this outer shell of the spaceship, and there's still so much left to do to make that look like a spaceship that I'm just kind of stuck. So I'm going to narrow my scope and work on this side square area over here. A while ago, y'all had suggested to turn that into something interesting and eye-catching, so that's what I'm going to do today. I don't know what it's going to end up being, but I'm excited. First things first, I'm going to have to clear off everything because I've just been piling all the pieces on top of it. I started by pulling this entire project over to my work table because I thought I was going to work on the exterior. I have all these triangles that I want to cover this with. These were all pieces that came out of these beams that I still need to install somewhere in the project. But I decided to save those for later because honestly, I just want to get to work on the room that's going to be inside this square. I built a very basic foam board box, and I did want it to have a little bit of a difference on the floor, so I built a step up to where the door is going to be. Because this room is in such close proximity to the changing room that I had made previously, I do want them to have some similarities so it looks like they're on the same spaceship. I'm going to speed through the room construction a little bit because it's very similar to the way I did that other room, and I'm going to make sure and link in the description that other room video in case you want to check it out. The difference for this one is I made a hole in the poster board that's creating the rounded roof section, and this is going to be where a plastic tube goes up through the top. I used a combination of poster board and cardstock to build up the floor texture and all the details around the walls, and this is what the final piece looks like. As you can see, I also cut some holes in the back wall, and these are going to be vents that are going into other parts of the project. If I haven't mentioned it yet, I've decided to make this into a hydro plant room, or a plant room that has some water running through it. So of course, after the paint job, I knew I had to age it quite a bit, or at least give some water damage to these perfectly painted panels. I'm using some shaved chalk pastel to go around the corners of the door. I painted the door a different color because I didn't want it to blend into the wall too much, so I ended up using a different colored chalk pastel on it as well. I used some of the similar colors on different parts of the room to help it all blend in, but mostly the door got a light brown and the rest of the room got a black chalk pastel. My initial idea for this tube was to make it look as though water was flowing through it. This is going to be kind of difficult because I don't want to use resin. Resin gets very hot when it cures, and if I'm using a plastic tube, it's very likely that it could warp the tube. So I'm going to play around with a few ideas. I'm going to show them to you on the video, even the ones that didn't quite work. But before I get to the interior, I need to work on the exterior of the tube. I want to make it look as though there is a connector piece that goes from the tube to the floor. I'm using 2 different thicknesses of cardstock and wrapping it around the lower part of the tube and gluing them in place. I decided to pre-paint the inside of the tube at both ends a black. This is going to conceal that the tube doesn't actually go anywhere, and it does make it look as though there was buildup on either side over the years of water or whatever is in the tube flowing through it. Then I used some of the same paint I used for the walls and went over the cardstock so it all looks like it will go together. I thought it was a good idea at this point to seal off one end of the tube. I had painted a circle of paper black and then glued it on, but later I will be removing that. I'm using some Elmer's glue to make it look as though there are some drips coming down the sides of the tube. Elmer's is a great glue for this because it's pretty thin and will drip, and in the end it dries clear. To create the flowing water effect without water, I wanted to try using cotton swabs, and I was going to color those with chalk pastel. The chalk pastel didn't work very quickly and it was taking forever to build up color, so I decided to use watercolor over the unrolled cotton swabs. And my plan ultimately, see, I had to take the bottom out because the glue was just not drying. Once I took the bottom out, I could run a fan through the tube and the glue dried. Alright, so here is where I am trying this process. I was okay if the water didn't look like earth water and if it looked like something a little different flowing through the tube. So I took different colors on the cotton swabs. I ended up pre-swirling them, so once they were in the tube they looked like it was swirling something around in the tube. However, once I got it into the tube and really pressed everything together, to me it was just looking like colored cotton inside of the tube. I saw a process on Next Jen's channel where she did this with cotton swabs, but I think she added oil to it. However, since I'm using mostly paper products for the creation of my project, I didn't think oil would be a very good idea. So this was kind of a scrap for me. It didn't really work. However, I did get a nice surprise. Once I had pulled all of the cotton out, I realized some of it had stuck to the glue that I guess wasn't completely dry on the inside. And at first I was kind of bummed because I had used all that time to get those glue drips, but then I realized it looked like algae even though it wasn't the right color, so I took some green watercolor paint, put that inside of the tube so that the cotton that was stuck on there would absorb it, and I really do think it looks like an old tube that had had water going through it. Several people on Facebook had said it looked like a fish tank tube. So I finally felt like I was on the right track for the look I was going for. I decided to make another half tube or quarter tube, and I had this leftover plastic tubing from something else, I don't even remember what it was. So I'm going to use that as my water delivery system to all the plants I'm going to put in this room. However, I'm going to hold on to this until later because I don't want to put this piece in there until all the plants are in the room. Okay, so do y'all remember 2 videos ago where Elegoo sent me a 3D printer and I reviewed it? Well, they actually sent me 2. Here I'm showing you my old 3D printer next to the new one. The new one is the bigger one. This is the Elegoo Saturn II printer that prints in 8K. So I just had to try out printing some alien plants and some interesting planters with this 3D printer for my project. I thought this would be a really fun way to try this out. I will put a link to my planters in the description box below in case you want to print it for yourself, and I will put a link to the Venus flytrap that I'm printing and any of the other things that I'm printing in the description box as well. I am going to be printing quite a bit, but hold on, there's still going to be more handmade stuff towards the end of this video, so hold on with me. I like to cure my prints with the supports on. I know not everybody does it that way. It may make it more difficult for me, but I feel like there's more of a chance that everything solidifies. All of these supports look so cool. They look like little mechanical bits. They're kind of reminding me of Fraggle Rock for some reason, but I'm going to hold those to the side and possibly make some little extra piles of junk that are going to go around the captain's ship. I also left some of these on here because I thought they were cool in between the different levels of the planter, but some of them did end up breaking off. They're not very strong, but anyway. And here is the Venus flytrap. I did not design this one. As I said, link in the description for the original designer and posting. I thought it was so detailed, and I can't believe the detail that this printer got of the teeth and those little vines. It just blows my mind. It also did a great job printing my wall planters. These are just going to hang on the wall and have plants coming out of them. Super simple. If you wanted to make these yourself, you could cut up Easter eggs, but I wanted to see how the printer would do. I also printed some alien mold I found online, and I thought it would be fun to have a little Easter egg of a Groot planter sitting in the corner of this plant room. And still, my mind is blown with just how smooth this print is. There's like no lines. You cannot see the layers on these. I'm amazed. I have these two little robots that I printed on the Neptune 3 that Elegoo had also sent me. So I will talk about those a little bit at the end of the video. But now I have my tray of prints that I can start painting and working on for the room. I'm sticking with my 1980s spaceship color palette, and so I'm going to be painting all of these planters a tan color, and I'm leaving them pretty flat. However, I do a little aging on the sides, but not that much. I'll do most of the aging once it's into the project. Of course, Groot got a little bit of a different color. He has a brown that's dry brushed over his tan base so that he still fits in with the other planters but still looks like Groot. For the Venus flytrap, I knew I had to put that together because it printed in two parts. So I've decided to try and put this together with some hot glue at first, just to hold it. And then I'm going to use some Milliput. This came in my Jazza Mega Minis box, and I had just never used it. I think the stuff that I was using is a little bit dried out. I had never opened it, but I don't know, maybe it just doesn't last that long. So around the area where I had hot glued it together, I started pressing the Milliput into any of the cracks and smoothing it down. This actually worked really, really well. I do think, like I said, it was a little old and cracked, so it took a little bit longer to work with, but in the end it did harden and it held the Venus flytrap together. I'm doing a pretty basic paint job on this Venus flytrap. There's so much detail that I really think I want the print to speak for itself. However, I am going in with some darker green towards the bottom and then around the lower jaw of the large head at the top. And then I did go over the vines a little bit with the darker green. I'm using a little bit of polyacrylic to go on the edges of the mouth just to make it look as though maybe the Venus flytrap had just taken a drink of water and the jaw is dripping just a little bit. Now that both the flytrap and the planter are painted, I can put them together. I had specifically designed this tower so that there would be room for the flytrap to sit in this bottom basin. So I'm just going to glue that in with some hot glue, and later on I am going to be adding soil so that it's permanently connected, but right now the hot glue helps me put everything in place. I'm also going to be painting those mold spores that you saw earlier very quickly. These are... They're kind of gross, but I thought they would be cool on the walls of the plant room, especially because I have that algae tube and it's going to be a little bit dirty in there. It makes sense to me that maybe these alien plants may have transferred some spores onto the walls. So I'm going to start placing these in where I think they would look interesting. I'm putting most of them, well, all of them towards the bottom of the room because I need to make sure I have room for the planters that are going to be glued towards the top of the room. So here's where I decided to put them all in, and in order to really blend them in with the wall, I mixed some paint and sand and glue together just in a tray, and I'm going to carefully dab that around the edges of the mold. This process actually ended up being really fun because I could make little swirls and different patterns coming off of the spores and holding on to the wall. So I had a lot of fun blending it into the room. I finished painting all the 3D printed plants, so now I have a ton of plants to make by hand. I'm gonna go in my closet and get the ever dreaded fake plant bag that's just a mess, but it's been holding on for several years. Let me get it. It has all my greenery that I've collected over the years, and I think with a combination of this and maybe some beads and some other odds and ends, I can put together some pretty good looking alien plants. I hope, at least. So I'm gonna dump this out and start collecting the things I think will work. This is from when my daughter had a 1-year-old Wonderland birthday. Let's make some plants. No, I know. It's so exciting. To prep for working with the wall hanging planters, I decided to hot glue them to a piece of cardboard that's standing upright. This is going to make it much easier for me to get the plants in there, and when I do the soil, it's going to help me make sure the soil is level and stays level while it's drying. Everything else should be able to sit flat on my work surface. These two black rectangles are actually going to be plants that are going into the vents. I think it would be cool to have plants in the vents that I had built into the room. I have to fill up Groot, the plant tower, and then of course the wall planters. Those two circles were going to be hanging planters, but I decided not to use them in the end. I'm starting out by selecting some of the plastic plants that I pulled out of the bag, and I really ended up using mostly plants that I pulled out of the bag. A lot of them are meant to be used in full scale or real life bouquets, but when you use them in a miniature scale, they looked oversized and weird. So for example, these puffballs on here may look okay in a real life size bouquet and not really bring attention. In a miniature, they start to look a little strange. So here's the first couple pieces I started putting together. I also liked the look of this puffball, but it was way too big to be used. But I realized they were individual little sprigs inside there, so I could cut one off and then glue it into one of the planter sections. They ended up being really bright and green, and I loved the color. I had some kind of cheap Christmas bauble plants, and I didn't want to use too many of them, but I did like the metallic look of it, so I just glued one of those towards the back. I added some leaves here and there. These were little plastic flowers that I thought looked a lot like succulents, and so I glued a lot of those with just the flower heads around the top in one of those areas that was like I needed a really short plant there. If you're looking for some cheap plastic plants like this so that you can create a plant room as well, I highly suggest looking in thrift stores. So many times plastic plants get donated because there are just a lot of them, and you can find some really cool stuff that you can cut apart, very much like this puffball. I'm pretty sure I got this at a garage sale. It was part of a bigger plant. So you can definitely find them for cheap without having to pay big bucks at a craft store. For Groot, I decided to add one of those colorful plants, and then I added some more sticky out plants at the top, and later I paint those a little bit orange on the end. I think it gives it a really nice look to Groot's planter. I filled up the wall planters in a very similar way, just cutting off little bits of plants here and there and sticking them together to see what I liked. Some of them were a little bit shorter and some of them were really tall. This was the point where I decided not to use the hanging planters that I thought were going to hang from the ceiling, because I realized the room was really going to be full by the time I got all these plants in there, especially if I was going to use this water tube system that I had previously created. So I'm going to go ahead and move on to the vent plants. I thought it'd be really cool to have plants growing in the vents as if these were aiding the air supply to the rest of the ship. Now, because these are going to be in the vents, they need to be pretty short. I had this mossy stuff that I had never used, and I thought this would be a good way to use it. Super simple. I just added glue to the top of this black mat board and then glued the moss down. I also cut off some very small leaves and glued those here and there within the moss so it looked like things were sticking up. Eventually, I do want to have lights that are coming through from behind the vents, and so these will create some really cool plant silhouettes once those lights are installed. Before moving on, I had this idea to create these little eyeballs within those little suction cup looking plants, and so I had these little tiny foam balls. You could also use beads for this, and I'm going to put those inside the little suction cup plants, and then later on I'm going to add irises once they're dried. So I think they'll be really kind of an interesting eye-catching moment when you see those eyeball plants. To create the soil, I'm going to use a mixture of coffee grounds and Elmer's glue. I always like to mention using caution when trying to use food in your miniatures because there can be an issue with mold or animals wanting to, or bugs really, wanting to eat your miniatures. However, I have had a lot of success with these coffee ground soil miniatures lasting for years. So all I do is mix it up and then push it into place around the plant and then allow it to dry. I have done this in the Addams Family house and I haven't had any issues so far. However, if you do try this, just make sure you check every now and then and make sure your plants are still doing good and there's no mold growing. I also added soil into the wall planters and allowed everything to dry thoroughly. And here, of course, I had to go back and add the irises to my little suction cup eyeball alien plants. I think they look a little suspicious. Now that everything's done, I can go ahead and remove my wall plants from my cardboard supports. I'm going to try and get as much hot glue off the back as I can. Now I can add it into the room and start really seeing this room come to life. Starting with the vent plants, I'm just going to add a little bit of glue to the bottom of the mat board and slide it into place. I'm going to hold it there until it takes hold, and then I can also add a little bit of glue on the wall and make that moss fold over the edge of the vent. Then I can start adding in some of the wall planters. I'm putting this wall planter towards the back because it had really long tendrils that went up the curved wall. And then I'm going to work on the right side of the room, laying them all out first to make sure I like how they look. Once that's done, I can go ahead and glue them in place and allow them to dry before flipping to the other side. These were the two planters I had left, so I just fit them into place and allowed everything to dry. This is how it's looking so far. I'm really loving the greenery in this room. And of course, now that the planters are in place, I need to age them into the room. Everything else has a little bit of dinginess to it, so I'm going to take my shaved chalk pastel and go around each of the edges, making sure I get quite a bit underneath. Some of you who've been watching the series for a while might recognize this coral. This coral was made by Michaelina, who also made the captain's doll. It was part of the story that she sent along with the captain. So of course I need to add the coral to this room. I'm going to add a little bit of sand that's permanently on the floor, and then the coral is going to sit on top of that, as if the captain's trying to keep the coral and the sand hydrated to make sure she can get all the secrets she needs to from the coral. I'm mixing the sand with some Elmer's glue, just like I did with the coffee, and spreading it around. Then I'm just going to place the coral on top and make sure I really get it smushed into the sand. It has quite a lovely sound as I'm trying to work it into the crevices and make it look a little natural on the floor. Now that all the permanently glued pieces are in place, I'm going to flip this room over and I'm going to work on the vents, because right now they just kind of look like they go off to nowhere. This plastic cross-stitch canvas was suggested to me by a viewer, and for the life of me I cannot find that comment or the sample they sent me where they had used it for decking on a walkway, but I think it's going to be perfect for the vents. So if you sent me that idea, please let me know in the comments. It ended up being perfect and I have plenty of it to use for walkways in the spaceship later on. But I really like the look. It was so simple and fast, easy way to finish the back of the vents. And I think it's going to be really cool once I get light back there because it's going to cast this gridded shadow forward into the room. I was so excited at this point to put the non-glued down miniatures into place, mainly the plant tower that has the Venus flytrap. I also wanted to place Groot into the room. He's going to be kind of hidden towards the back, just like a little Easter egg for people to find. I also wanted to put a very recognizable earth plant into the room, so here is a cactus that's made by Catherine Brickner. I will put a link to her miniature making channel in the description box below. So here's how it looks with all the plants in place. I am so happy with this so far. I can't wait to actually get some lighting in here so that everything lights up and shines so bright and green. Now it's time for this water system tube that I made, and I will tell you in the end I'm not the biggest fan of how it turns out, but I talked with my patrons and I think we have a solution. But before I get to that, I decided to force these tubes to go in the directions I wanted to by using a heat gun to heat them up and then slowly bend them into position. I'm using the paper towel to block off any of the other plastic parts or parts that had hot glue so that nothing melted. Once I was happy with the directions, I went ahead and glued it in place. I was talking with my patrons and many of them said I probably don't like it because the tubes look out of scale. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut off some of the tubes and then put in smaller tubes. It really does block off the view to that back algae tube that I really worked hard on, I guess I would say, or I failed hard on and then it worked out in the end. But for now, I'm working with what I have. I'm just using a Christmas ornament hook and I'm bending it around a pencil so that it will slide onto the tubing, and then I can insert it up through the ceiling so that it will hold the tube in place. Hopefully I can find a smaller tube to replace this with, and then I won't feel like so much of the background is being blocked off. I do like how it looks like it's hydrating the coral from above. I do like the concept of the tubing, and I do think it does work in the larger concept of it being a room inside of a spaceship, but I just need to make the tubes a little bit smaller so that it doesn't cause such of an eyesore right there in the front. So of course we have to insert it into the spaceship. Our spaceship, which I guess is currently sponsored by Pink Panther. Just kidding, not sponsored. And here's how it's looking. It's just going to be a little hidden gem on the side of the spaceships. And you might be wondering when I'm actually going to get back to the front part of the project. Well, doing this part of the project has really inspired me to get the side of this ship done, and it's also given me a lot of ideas for how I want to do the inside. So I have all these triangles that I think will work for the outside. Let me know if you think I should do YouTube shorts where I'm showing little short clips of me doing some of these projects, something that wouldn't take up an entire video or would be too boring for a video. I just really haven't tried YouTube shorts, and yeah, so let me know what you think. Of course, we had to put the captain into place so you could see scale. And these little flimsy movie around robots that I 3D printed, I think would be really fun additions to this project. I'm going to paint them both in a live stream coming up next week. It's going to be on Tuesday, so make sure and check the time in your time zone. But I think it'd be really fun to have these kind of sitting around the ship as if they were helper bots. So on the inside, you can see where the room sits. Here is the 17th century portion, here is the plant room, and then of course in front of that is going to sit the changing room that I had made previously that has the captain's jacket for both the spaceship and the 17th century ships. So it's going to sit in front there. You might remember previously I had made this cardboard mock-up of a spaceship hallway that was going to go above the changing room, but since creating the plant room, I have changed my mind and I want to keep this area open on top, which means I'm going to have to do some metal siding on all these rooms, so you're still going to see them, but I think it's going to give it a much more open but still spaceship look to it. I've had 2 books come in for the captain that I want to show you now. This book was made by the Miller Boys and it comes all the way from the Philippines. It has Filipino rice paper on the interior and many drawings that were hand done. They're done in gold, so they really pop off the page. The next book was done by Dearte. I hope I said your name correctly, all the way from Germany. This is a first edition of Kepler's Dream. All the pages open and there are tiny words on the inside so the captain can sit down and read. This book came with a story that a letter fell out, which was directly addressed to Captain Maggie. So I will be adding this to the captain's log so anyone who visits the project can read through it. Thank you all for sending them in. Well, that's all I have for you today. I hope you enjoyed it. Big thank you to Elegoo for sending me the printer. I was blown away by the level of detail, and that wasn't even with 8K resin, which is available to print with an 8K printer. So I don't even know what that's going to look like, but 3D printing seems to only be getting better and better for miniaturists because the smaller you go, the more detail you need to have. So this is the end of the video, but I know a few of you wanted an update on the miniature show that I went to, and I'm going to talk a little bit about how my channel is going. So if you want to stick around for that, feel free to. If not, I will see you in the next video. All right, miniature show update. Everything went really well. I learned a lot. I met a few of you, which was really, really cool. And in general, I just really enjoyed it. I made a little bit more money than I did last year, which last year I broke even. I made 0. So making anything this year was good. But I took what I learned from last year and improved my table display. I'll put a picture in here for you now if you haven't seen it. And I plan to continue to do that as I move forward. Just take things that I learn and improve the display. And of course, I'm always coming out with new products. And when I say always, I mean like every 2 months, because it seems to take me forever to do that. But hopefully next year will be even more profitable, and in the future I would love to go to other shows. I just have to make sure that I'm making enough money from the show that I can literally just drive an hour to first before I can pay for plane tickets and hotels and extra food and all that kind of stuff. So I'm just learning locally first. And for a little update on my channel, if you are a regular viewer, you've probably noticed that I haven't been posting quite as much. One realization I came to was I have never really done my channel, my store, parenthood, all of that stuff, and real life at the same time. My online store started in 2020. My first item went up in my store in January of 2020, which of course didn't get that many orders, but then we all know how 2020 went and everything shut down, everything stopped. All extracurricular activities, going out and being places, all of that came to a halt. So during that time, I filled that space with my store. And now that things are revving up again, I'm having a really hard time balancing the channel, balancing the store, and the rest of everything I have to do in life. I'm very thankful that I don't have to choose. I can keep doing all of those things, but I just have to be a little bit more mindful of my schedule. Previously, I was putting out a video every week, and I've just found that it's impossible for me to do that. I really love all the aspects of the business that I'm building because I don't really have control over YouTube. They could just, turn my channel off, take it out of the algorithm someday, and that's out of my control. However, the store is in my control, and if for some reason my channel or YouTube ceases to exist in the future, I do have control over that and I can continue to grow it under my own rules, I guess, and guidance. And I really enjoy the creative aspect of it. It takes a lot of my architectural background to create the designs and make them into patterns, and I just really also love seeing what y'all create with my kids. So instead of feeling like I have to choose one or the other, I'm just allowing myself to edit videos in the time that I have, which unfortunately results in less videos, but hopefully they'll still be worth the wait during that in-between time. So I appreciate your patience so much. I don't plan on going anywhere. I'm going to be right here on Bentley House Mini's YouTube channel as long as I can be. And I will be continuing to work on my projects such as this one and the Beetlejuice house. Of course, we have Beetlegust coming up. I can't believe it's almost August. June, July, August. Yeah, that's how it goes. where I will be making all of the waiting room characters for the Beetlejuice waiting room. I'm so excited for that. I do plan to just buckle down and make as many of the characters I can in August. However, I think I'm just gonna keep going until they're made. So Beetlejuice may end up in September as well, but we shall see. I really don't want to put that pressure back on myself again, saying you have to get a video out every week, because this has been really good. And it's renewed that creativity and excitement for my projects and for making videos, because I don't feel as pressured to just get them out one after another. If you stuck around for this part, thanks for listening. Let me know if you have any thoughts or comments down below. I always love to hear what you think. And I will be back with another video as soon as I can. I hope you all have an amazing week, and I will see you in the next one. Bye. I hope I got that all in one take, because now I have to go to the dentist to get my face numbed. Well, not to get my face numbed, but because they have to do that for the dental procedure. Anyway, so you're gonna get what you get. Gosh.
Mommy, my iPad works again.
Good. Hello? Hello? It's very echoey. What is echoey? Shh. Oh, it's very echoey. Ooh.